Hey everyone, and welcome to this webinar dedicated to behavior-driven development. So during the next hour, during this session, we'll share with you how to kickstart a new behavior-driven development project with Hiptest and how to scale it across your organization. So we'll share some of the best practices, what we learned so far that can help you adopt BDD smoothly and scale it. So two presenters for this webinar. So myself, I'm co-founder and CEO of Hiptest, directors of product at SmartBear. So I'm more the product guy, and I will run this session with Vincent. Vincent is a senior developer at Hiptest, the expert of our expert about test automation. So you'll see that behavior-driven development is first about communication, about bridging the gap between business and developers. So you will have the 2 points of views, the one from the product guy, myself, and the one from the dev guy, Vincent.
The correct one.
The correct one. No, I'm not sure. I think the correct one is, well, to be clear, the correct point of view is the one of the product guy. But unfortunately, what goes in production is not what I have in mind, is what Vincent, so the developer, has in mind. This is what goes finally in production. So that's why we need to be aligned. So this is exactly what BDD is about. So this is the agenda of this session. I will first start by a brief introduction about behavior-driven development. Some of you are already familiar and practice BDD on a day-to-day basis. For others, it's more a new approach. So I will start with the basics. And then Vincent will do a demo and show you how Hiptest can help you create your BDD scenarios, explaining also some of the good practices when it comes to capture the discussion, create your feature files, your BDD scenarios with the right terminology, with the right style. We'll also see how to execute these BDD scenarios. So once the implementation of the feature has been done, we can execute these BDD scenarios either manually or automatically. So you will see how Hiptest can help you with that. And the last part of the demo, which is my favorite one, is about living documentation. So how can we turn this automated test into a living documentation of the product that reflects the real behavior of the application, of the feature in production, and a documentation that is always up to date. I will end up this webinar by an interesting customer case. So Parkeon, that adopted behavior-driven development a couple of years ago, and Hiptest, and they have used BDD at scale on a project, huge project ticketing system for the city of Helsinki. So during the demo, we'll see some good practices on a basic example, but with this customer case, I just want to make sure that what we will see and what we share with you, of course, can scale and in fact will help you scale BDD across your organization. So let's try to answer this tough question: what's BDD? So BDD, there are a couple of misunderstandings about what BDD is. It's first foremost about communication. As I said before, I think the oldest problem in software is the misalignment between developers and product guys. What I have in mind as business stakeholder is not what will be in production. What will be in production is what the dev team has in mind. So it's very important. It's critical, in fact, to make sure that the business stakeholders are aligned with developers. And this is exactly what BDD is about. During the discovery phase, the idea is to discuss the why of a feature, discuss the behavior of the feature, and create a shared understanding. So among product owners, testers, developers, all together, make sure we are on the same page, and once it's okay, then we can start the development. So BDD is first about communication. It's not, or not just about test automation. There are many teams, in fact, that start using Cucumber, SpecFlow, or any other test automation with the BDD flavor. So using given when then syntax, and just because you use the given when then syntax and use Cucumber or SpecFlow doesn't mean you do BDD. If you miss all the discussion up front, all the communication, so during the discovery phase, then you miss all the value of behavior-driven development. So I don't mean here that test automation is not important. It is, and I will also share our own practices at Hiptest. We automate the test. So test automation is an important part of our process, but the discovery phase is even more important, and that's what BDD is about. So first, just to sum up what we said in terms of process, the idea is to create a shared understanding among all the stakeholders, and to create this shared understanding, we use examples. So based on the couple of examples, can be one or many for a given feature, we'll create for this shared understanding, so among developers, testers, and the business. So we'll all be on the same page, what the feature should do. Then we'll use these examples, so acceptance criteria, written potentially using the given when then syntax. We'll use these acceptance criteria to drive the development of the feature, but we start development with a clear understanding. And these acceptance criteria will be turned into automated tests. So they will define, what's interesting with this approach is they will define the stop for the developer. At Hiptest, we use behavior-driven development. In our development process, we use also Hiptest to capture the BDD scenarios. And before we start developing a feature, we have created all these BDD scenarios. So we have created a shared understanding. And typically, Vincent, as a developer, knows that the implementation of a feature is done, so meets the business expectations when all the BDD scenarios that we agreed on at the very beginning of the process, they do pass. When they pass, no need to get back to me and say, does it address the point? Yes, if all the scenario pass. And then one of the great outcome when you have automated your BDD scenarios and integrated your test automation process with the CI is that you can generate, as I said, the living documentation. So we'll see that during the demo. Just before the demo, this is the process, the testing process that we have at Hiptest. So typically, as a product leader, I spend part of my day in Trello, so looking at the backlog, managing priorities, refining this backlog, discussing different priorities with customers. And so we are organized, we use 2-week sprint, and typically before starting a new sprint, so I make sure that we have selected the right priority, the right features to work on. And before starting the sprint, so we have this discovery phase with the QA and with the developers, where we refine each feature we will develop during the sprint. We refine each feature into multiple examples. So we use Hiptest for that. We use also the example mapping technique to make sure that we capture efficiently the behaviors of the feature. And then we use these BDD scenarios to drive the implementation of the stories of the feature. Then all the tests at Hiptest are automated. So we automate 100% of the BDD scenarios. None of them are executed manually. We integrate with CI/CD. We use Shippable for that. So once the feature is developed and we push the code, Shippable will execute all the tests. So first create the build, execute the test. When all the tests pass, then we deploy in production. And we can, for some features, also do exploratory testing in production. So at Hiptest, we just test the new features. We make sure there is, or we try to make sure, we can never be completely sure that there is no unexpected behavior for this new feature. And once we are confident, then we can open, so make this feature available to all the users. So we typically go through this loop a couple of times, multiple times a day. So bad days we can deploy once in production, and the good days it can be up to 10 times in production. So it doesn't mean we deploy 10 new features every day. It just means, unfortunately for me, it just means that we deploy small increment of features, and as I said, using feature flag, we can make them at some point available to all the users. So that's our process, and as you can see here, BDD and Hiptest is plays a central role in this process as it helps us be aligned, create a shared understanding, and drive development very efficiently. And the benefits of that is also that it accelerates significantly the test automation process. We'll see that during the demo. Plus, we can generate the living documentation. So that's it for Hiptest, our own process. Let's look now at an example.
Yeah, so you should all see my screen right now. So let's have a look to one of our examples. So this is one of the sample projects you should already have if you have a Hiptest account. And if you have lost, for example, this example, and you want to play with it, it's still possible to regenerate it from this menu in Hiptest. So this project is a small ATM, but what we are going to really look at is the way to correctly organize and write the different scenarios and features. So let's have a look to the scenario place. First thing you may see here is that is the way we organize the scenario. So once again, it's a pretty simple project here, but what you will see is that each feature of this application is a folder in Hiptest. So basically on this ATM, you can do two things. You can withdraw some money, or you can transfer money from one account to the other. You may think, okay, but my project has more than two features. Hopefully, at least I hope for you. Of course, this is a small project, so we all organize the, the folder on a, let's say, in a flat way. But of course, this hierarchy, it's possible to have it, to have multiple subfolder or subfolder. You organize it the way you want. Just to give an idea, at Hiptest, so we have 4 main folders. So right below the root folder, one about defining the features and scenario, one about executing the test, one about learning, and the last one is about all the administration, so project setting, organization, and things like that. And inside, it splits in sub-feature, then sub-features, and so on. If I recall correctly, last time I checked, at least it was 6 or 7. The maximum depth was 6 or 7 folders. So yeah, you can organize as you want. But yeah, it's really important to keep in mind that all this example describing one specific feature should go in the same folder. Now, if we have a look at the first folder, but the second one will be the same, what we will see is that we used here a job story to describe the feature. So using the classical in order to, so in order to get a benefit as some role or a person I can or I want to do something. This is pretty important to have everyone be able to understand who you are working for, or at least who is going to benefit from the feature you are going to develop, and what is needed, what's the benefit is going to get. It's really important, especially for developers. This way, it's really easier, at least, to, let's say, put yourself in the shoes of the user when you start working on a feature. You know that, just to give an idea with Hiptest, we know that, okay, this feature, it's more meant for people doing manual testing. So we'll try to have as much as possible the mindset of someone doing some manual testing. Next feature is going to be for some product owner, for example. So once again, we'll do our best to put ourselves in the shoes of a product owner when doing so. And always keep the benefits in mind. It's really, really important when you want to develop feature that will really matter for people who are going to use it. So that's the description part. And then we'll see that we have one or multiple examples describing the feature. So let's have a look to the first one. And here you can see a scenario written in a classical Gherkin style. So using the given when done annotation and the way the test is written. So let's have a look to some good practices we can see here. So first, as I said, the use of the given when then syntax. These annotations, so they come from Gherkin, and they are really useful to easily understand what an example does, what is the action done, what's the expected output. So the given part will describe the context in which an example takes place. So here, for example, we got some money on the account, and there is enough real money in the ATM, and the user is authenticated with a valid card. The when part will describe the action or actions. You can have multiple ones that are done during the example. So here we can see that the account holder requests a certain amount of money. I'll come back to that just after. And the then part will describe the expected output. So here, what do we want to check? We want to check that the account holder got the same amount, and that this amount has been removed from his account balance, and at the end, he gets his credit card returned, which is always good when you go to the ATM. Another thing to note while I'm looking at this scenario is the way the sentences are written. And here, basically, all the steps are written using the declarative style. So basically, you get two ways to write scenarios, declarative or imperative. In the imperative style, you describe what you do. Let's have a look to the step 4. The account holder requests a certain amount. If I had to write it in an imperative style, I would say, okay, the user selects the withdraw menu. Then he types the amount on the keyboard. Then he presses the valid button. Then he selects, I don't know, I don't want a ticket, something like that. It's really precise. It's really describing what is done, but it's not focusing on the behavior. And once again, what we want to capture here is not how things are done, it's what is done. So here, all those different steps, you can see it's just summarized in a declarative style saying, okay, the account holder requests a certain amount. Once again, I come back to the amount just after. And it's really important to keep this declarative style. Don't focus on how things are done. Just focus on what is done. What is the benefit? You don't really care about the UI or the interface at this moment. What you want to capture is the behavior. Your UI is going to change. The behavior will be the same. And it's really important not to focus on the UI. For example, when you develop a website, people will look at it on the desktop. They will look at it on a tablet, on a mobile phone. The interface will change, obviously, but the behavior will be the same. And once again, what we want to capture here, we want to capture the behavior of the application, not its interface. You can, of course, complete those feature files with wireframes, screenshots, whatever you want to describe the UI, but this is not supposed to be done in the BDD scenario. The BDD and you can guess with the B in front, describe the behavior. Last thing we can see on this scenario is you can see that the last 3 steps are using the should verb. So this is a practice we have internally at Hiptest, and we decided in our BDD project and all our BDD project, when we write a sentence containing the verb should, it's making an expectation. So you can easily I would say that differentiate 2 steps that look pretty close, like the account balance is something, this gray part is a parameter. You know that the account balance is going to set something on the system. Whereas when you have the account balance should be, and once again a parameter there, you know that this should be part is going to check something. And it's really important when you are going to reuse steps. You know that if you see the should verb, this is making an expectation. We could use the expert verb, we could use any other verb. We decided that here for Hiptest, it's not like it's not something you have to do, but these kind of good practices are really useful. Another one we can't see here, but we have in our own test about Hiptest, when we use the create verb. So for example, the user creates a new scenario. We know that if we use create, we are creating the scenario using the interface. This way, we know we are going to simulate clicks on this page and so on. So these kind of good practices are really useful in the team when you want to reuse things or when you want to understand what a scenario does. And last but not least, so I said I'm going to get back on the amount parts. This is something described here. So here we have a data table. If you are familiar with the Gherkin syntax, it's the equivalent of the examples. And those examples, those data sets for us, are going to help you avoid duplication in multiple scenarios. So here we got one scenario, so with $100 in the machine, or at least on the account balance, and so on. And we'll generate 3 tests. One where we will grow all the money that is on the account balance, half of it, or only $20. And so in the first case, we are going to check that at the end, we don't have any money left. Next time, we have $50. And the last one, we have $80. So it's one thing we, at least we do our best to help you with that, with the test, to help you avoid copy-paste in multiple scenarios. And this data table is one of the easiest way to ensure, okay, you don't need to copy-paste 1, 2, 3, 15 times the same scenario to run it with different inputs. So now that we've seen what, let's say, a good scenario looks like, let's try to write a new one. So we'll go to Jira, so where we have the cash withdrawal project stored, and we can see we got a new feature here. We want to ensure that, yeah, there is an error that is displayed when the account holder does not have sufficient fund to transfer money. So what we are going to do, we are going to go in this second feature folder, so about transferring cash, and we are going to create one new scenario. So I'm just going to use the same name. So account holder does not have sufficient money. When we create this scenario, I'm going to write it. First, we need some context. So let's say, so the context once again is the given part. So what we need to have first is say, okay, what kind of money do we have on the account balance? So the account balance is, and here you can see as I'm typing, Hiptest is proposing me to reuse existing action word. So this way I'm going to reuse exactly the same terminology from scenario to scenario. It's really helpful, really important to do that. First, because it's going to ease the maintenance in the project, as all those steps, those action words, a single point of maintenance. It's going to ease the automation, because there are also single point of automation. So if I reuse an already automated action word, I don't have anything to do, and not having anything to do is always good in development. And last but not least, all the scenario will use the same terminology. It's the kind of thing that's really important, especially when you are you start having a big project and new people coming in the company and so on. It's so much easier to understand what a product does when you always use the same terminology, and not one time using I login, second time using I sign in, third time saying a new user sign in, and so on and so on. Reuse existing terminology is really one of the important things when it comes to BDD. Once again, because one of the goals of BDD is to align everyone and to have everyone have this shared understanding. And obviously, it's easier to understand the same thing when we all use always the same terminology. So we need some money on our account. So let's say we've got $100 there. We need some money on the saving account balance. Here, once again, I'm going to reuse a step. Here you can see what I was talking about previously with the should verb. I know here that as I'm setting a concept, I'm setting a context. I should not use the account balance should be, because this is going to make an expectation. And I know simply by knowing that it's the is verb, or at least the be verb, I know that this is going to set some data on the system on the test and not checking things. So here I'm going to have $1,000 there, and I need a valid card. Once again, as you can see, I haven't created any new steps so far. It's a pretty small project. There is only four different scenarios, but still on the 3 steps for the setup, at least the given part, I haven't created anything new. Considering this project is already automated, there's nothing to do to get this scenario running. It's not checking anything, so it's not that useful, but at least keep that in mind. At least for the people doing the automation, the more you reuse, the less work they have, and they will be thankful for that. So now we need to do some action. So it's going to be the when part. And so what's going to happen is that the account holder is going to transfer too much money to the saving accounts. So let's say it transfers $150 to the saving account. Here, what we expect is some kind of message saying, nope, you can't. So let's say something like message saying the transfer is not possible, should be displayed. Here, obviously, especially with all the typos I've made, you can see that there is no proposition made by Hiptest, because that's a new sentence. The words are not matching anything already existing. So I don't have anything to reuse. I'm just going to create a new action word. So an action word is this step that you can reuse across multiple scenarios in Hiptest. And now what's really important is next time something, say for example, saying, this action word is going to be available for auto-completion. So this way, next time someone in this project creates something about a message saying the transfer is not possible, it can reuse the actual word I just created. Simple as that. I can build my own terminology as I'm writing my scenarios. So we've got a message. We'll just check that the account balance is still the same. So this time I'm not going to use then the account balance is something. I'm going to use should be. And I'm going to check that the money hasn't been transferred. And same thing for the saving account. So same thing. Once again, I reuse the should one, not the is, and it should still be $1,000. Yes, $1,000. As you can see here, I've written this new scenario. It really describes the use case of what's happening when someone wants to transfer money, but he doesn't have. I just had to write one new step. Simple as that. I'm reusing it. It's something that's easy to understand by product people. You don't need to be technical. You don't need to belong to the QA or the tech guys to understand that. I could show that to the marketing and they will understand what the scenario does. No need to be technical, and anyone can understand what the feature does simply by reading this example. And that's one of the goals, one of the most important things to keep in mind when it comes to BDD. So let's have a look to some good practices to keep in mind when writing new scenarios. First one, and really important, keep the benefits in mind. At Hiptest, every time we create a new folder, a new feature, we use one of our job story to describe exactly what it does, who it's dedicated to, or at least who it's intended to, what is the benefit they are going to get from that. And that's really important when you want to be sure that what you develop is going to match the needs of the users. Because, yeah, once again, we don't develop just for fun or just because it's something we like to do. We also develop because we want to ensure that we create features that matter for our users. Second point, really important, use a declarative style. I understand that it's hard sometimes to write scenarios and not focusing on the UI, not trying to say, oh, I'm going to click there, or a pop-up is going to be displayed, and so on. It's hard to do. Frankly, I got example, and still sometimes I do that when writing the first draft of new scenarios. It may be hard, but keep in mind that you don't really care about the UI, and what you want to focus on is the behavior and not the interface. You can describe the interface in so many better ways than text. That makes sense, obviously. The text is great to describe the behavior, and wireframes are wonderful to describe interface. So keep in mind, describe what is done and not how it's done, how it's going to be described in another way. Second one, third one, by the way, use a consistent business terminology. When you are using Hiptest, that means reuse action word. And the more you reuse them, once again, the easier it's going to be to maintain your project, the easier it's going to be to automate it, the easier it's going to be to understand for newcomers what your scenario does, what your product does. There's just no, it's only beneficial to reuse existing action words. So it's really important to keep that in mind. And last but not least, and sadly don't have time to show that in a short webinar, you should spend time to review and refactor your scenarios, your example. Because as a developer, one of the, not the most part of my day, but at least one big part of it is saying, okay, that's copy-paste. This thing, it could be made better. And it's important to do that on a daily basis as soon as you see that, at least if it doesn't take 4 months, of course. But it's important to do it continuously, because you don't want to, let's say, one day hit the wall and, oh, we got 4 months to do refactoring on this thing. Even if you spend time doing writing new scenario properly and trying to reuse and so on, sooner or later you will have copy-paste. And you need to spend some time to check them and ensure you can fix that before it starts being a real mess and a real debt to maintain. And just to show you one example in this project, here we can see that the first 3 steps here are, we got $100 on the account balance, 1,000 on the saving ones, and we got a valid card. If I have a look at the second one here, it's another project, another scenario in the same folder, feature. Well, the 3 first steps, not the same order, but the same content. $100 on the account balance, 1,000 on the saving one, and a valid card. Basically, that's copy-paste. What can I do? I could pretty easily remove those 3 steps from the beginning of both scenarios and decide to move them in the setup parts of the folder. Once again, for those of you who are more familiar with Gherkin, setup is the equivalent of a background, and that's a list of steps that is executed before each scenario inside the folder or the feature. So basically, I could have here my 3 steps saying, okay, given there is a valid card and $100 on the saving account, on the account, and 1,000 on the saving account, it would be there, and it would be once again a single point of maintenance. So if we decide to have $200 instead on the account balance, I just have to modify it in the setup and not in each scenario. It's just 2 scenarios for the moment, but maybe in 2 months it's going to be 10 or 15 different examples. And once again, we don't want copy-paste because, yeah, copy-paste is bad. So now that we've got our scenarios, they are written correctly, maybe it's time to run them, or at least execute them. I'm just going to go pretty fast on this part. One thing to note, and one thing that is sadly kind of wrong, most people think that BDD is meant and only meant for automation, and that's wrong. But once again, that's because some people, or lots of people, too many of them, think that gherkin, or at least cucumber, is BDD, and that's not the case. And it's even in that case, it's not because you write your scenario using cucumber, or at least using the gherkin syntax, that you can't run them manually. And here, for example, I could decide to have my test cases run in a manual way. So here, for example, I can say, okay, this one, this specific test failed. I can add some comments, some attachments, and so on. So just one pretty quick thing, just remember that it's not because you use behavior development that you need to automate everything. If you want to automate everything, that's what we do, that's great. That's something we think that is always useful, but sometimes it's, let's say, easier, or at least when you want to, let's say, for example, try out a new feature, you may want, before spending too much time in the automation process, you may say, okay, I'm going to first do some manual testing on this feature, just first to see if the user are going to find it useful. I don't want to spend 2 or 3 days automating my test cases, and in 2 months, see that no one used this feature and we need to throw it away. That can be one of the good reasons to use, for example, manual testing. Just keep in mind, it's not because you do BDD that you need to be fully automated. And so yeah, when it comes to executing the test cases in a more automated way, if you write them in Hiptest, you have the possibility to generate test cases in any of the languages there. And once again, one thing to remember, it's not because you write your scenarios in Hiptest using the given when then syntax that you have to export the test cases, or at least execute them with Cucumber or SpecFlow or B8, B8, or any gherkin-based syntax. Just to give an example, I'm going to download my code as Java JUnit, which is not the framework which is the most known for its BDD support. But here you will see that we generated some code for this project to be able to run the test cases. So here, for example, we have all our test cases. So a transferring cache is there, so we can recognize the scenario that was just written. So a sufficient font for transferring cache, and so on. So we recognize the test cases. And if you recall, I said that the action words, so the reusable steps used in the scenarios are single point of automation. It is. So basically here, what you see is that all the steps in those scenarios are called to action words. And those action words are implemented here in the action words.java class. And that's where the automation team is going to kick in and fill in the blanks. So they can use Selenium to test a website, Appium to test a mobile app, or Robotium to test a robot, I guess, or use HTTP commands to test an API. That's completely up to you and up to the way you want to automate. But
maybe we can just say, Vincent, that tomorrow we'll have a webinar dedicated to test automation with Hiptest. So if you are interested to know more and have more details about the test automation part, then feel free to attend the webinar tomorrow dedicated to test automation at scale with Hiptest.
Yeah, it's going to be easier.
Just give you a flavor of all the options and possibilities you have.
Yeah, and you'll see in tomorrow too how we can integrate with a CI tool. Just to give you a quick view of the integration with CI, basically all you will need is a test run dedicated to the CI and simply 3 command line copy-pasted to your Travis, your Jenkins, your Bamboo configuration, and that's going to push the results back, as you can see here, from your CI. And what's interesting with this CI one, here we get all the automated tests that have been run on Jenkins or Travis or whatever, shippable in our case. It's pushing the results back, and okay, that's good. We have defined our ID, so return a different scenario example. We have checked that everything is working fine. We've run our test cases, automated them, and checked everything. Now, what we want to do is to learn from this execution. That's where the living documentation is going to kick in. So what is a living documentation? So it's the scenarios, the example, the features that have been executed. So either in an automated way. So here, for example, it's generated from the continuous integration test run, but it can also be generated from test cases that have been run or executed manually. And here, what we will see is a really easy way to share what is done, what has been described, and what is in production with any stakeholder in the company. So here, contrary to the design parts of Hiptest, you don't need to navigate from scenario to scenario. You really have the clean and easy overview of what are the different features of your project. So here, for example, with growing cash, we still have this benefit in mind, and we can see the different scenarios. So here we recognize the one we were looking at, the use case where you don't have enough money to withdraw it, or what happens when your card is not valid anymore. And here, it's really a place where everyone is going to understand what the product does. It's really the knowledge base of your product simply here. So here, once again, you don't need to be technical, and you can easily see in just a second, you can see, okay, that's the different feature. And of course, for each feature, you're going to have its history. Not this one, apparently, but maybe this one, that's better. Here you can see, okay, this feature we started working on 6 months ago. And maybe there was just 1 or 2 examples at this moment, and we added another 1 2 months ago. And last week, we decided to implement maybe 5 different examples. And all this history, you'll have it in a single place. And it's really important. It's where it's really meant for, let's say, more the managers and so on, where you can say, okay, this is my feature, this is what it does, and that's its history. And that's really, once again, the knowledge base of your product. You know all the features and when it was developed, and also why it was developed.
Awesome. So that's personally my favorite feature, the one I use most as a Hiptest product manager. So thanks, Vincent, for sharing this. I'm just going to take the wall back. So let's end up now this session with an example of behavior-driven development at scale, just to make sure that it does not work just on cash withdrawal small examples, but can also work on a real-life example. So for this project, the ticketing system of the city of Helsinki, we're talking about a huge project, a system that is supposed to manage, and so far is managing now because it's live in production, 1 million commuters a day. This is this kind of project, very complex, with many different partners involved in the development of the project. So Tieto as main contractor, and Parkeon, the Hiptest customer, the company that use BDD at scale. So Parkeon was one of them. The system itself, pretty complex and composed of 3 main parts. So first we have the back office. So that was developed using Node.js for configuration and monitoring. We also have the sales point and services points developed using web services. And of course, the onboard and on-street devices, so that you use to check the tickets. And these devices were using the Android operating system. So complex system made of both of hardware and software using different technologies, different stack. So when we look at the Parkeon organization itself, so they were in charge of developing software and also part of the hardware. In Parkeon, there were 8 teams involved in 3 different countries. So that represented 65 engineers. So 3 countries means 3 different languages. There was the French team, 1 team based in the UK, another one in Poland. So they were speaking different languages. And the thing is, you need to make sure that all these distributed teams work very closely together. They have a shared understanding of the system and the feature they are working on to make sure that the project will be successful. And that's definitely one of the main reasons why Parkeon decided to use BDD for this project. It's a 4 years project, so also a long project. They decided to have a common approach to development, a common methodology, so BDD for all the 8 teams. And once again, the idea was to make sure they create a shared understanding, so they have a more efficient development process. And to be clear, one of the key points to BDD adoption was the living documentation part. So the ability not only to create this shared understanding and drive development based on these BDD scenarios, but in this kind of huge project, you may know that there are 2 different phases. The first one, that is the build. So you spend 3-4 years developing this complex system. And at some point, once the system is live, it's in production, you have the maintenance phase. So that's typically a different team, much smaller. So in this case, it's 5 people that are in charge of the maintenance, and they are not the one that have developed the application. And during this switch, you need to transfer everything. You need to make sure that the 5 people that will be in charge of the maintenance, they have the knowledge about the code, they have also the business knowledge, and the living documentation feature was definitely a compelling resource for them to adopt BDD. Not only you have all the automated tests, so of course unit test, integration test, but also the BDD automated tests that were used to drive development. They've been able to leverage these BDD scenarios and this living documentation to transfer the business knowledge from one team, the build team, 65 engineers, to the maintenance team. And that was, definitely one of the key reasons why they decided to adopt BDD. When we look at the coverage or the way the BDD scenarios were split across the different levels of the system. So here, just to make it clear, we're just talking about acceptance test. We don't even mention the unit test, technical test developed by the dev team that don't contribute to the conversation. Here, we just focus on BDD scenarios that drive value, that make sense for the business, and that have been used to support and capture the conversation. So there were 200 tests, BDD scenarios developed at the higher part of the pyramid, end-to-end test, almost 500 at the system test, 1,000 for the integration between different modules, and 1600 for to test the module one by one. And once again, just from the acceptance point of view, not inside the module itself and unit test. So that's the breakdown of the BDD scenarios for this project. And what's interesting here is that altogether they have designed, created around 3,000 scenarios. So using the good practices that Vincent mentioned and shared during the demo. So reusing a consistent business terminology as much as they could, using the should terminology, automating all of them. And what's interesting when we look at the ratio, they've been able to create these 3,000 scenarios using just 1,700 steps. It means that at the end of the day, when you have to maintain all these 3,000 scenarios, you just have to maintain 1,700 steps because the action word, the step, is a single point of maintenance. It's also, as Vincent mentioned, a single point of automation. So when you have to automate these scenarios, 3,000 scenarios, in this case, they just had to automate 1,700 steps. And this is what they did. So they've been able, for this project at scale, to automate all the checks, all the BDD scenarios. So running them automatically as part of the build of the CI. Sorry, that's the tool stack that they use. So Atlassian, Jira to manage all the user stories. And this stack was used by all the 8 teams. Then using BDD and Hiptest to capture the discussion and design the different scenarios. So 3,000 of them. Step 3, they implement the story, and then we're using Jenkins as a CI tool to create the build and execute the tests that were automated. And what's interesting in their context is that it's not just about software. So when you have to automate these tests, they also had to develop a robot that was introducing a card in the device and making sure that the end-to-end test, including the hardware, was working as expected. So just for the test automation part, very interesting, and I think it would be worth to do a webinar dedicated to just this part. But once again, if you use some of the good practices when capturing the discussion and creating the BDD scenarios, then you will ease dramatically the maintenance of all the scenarios, but also the test automation part. The last feedback that is very interesting about this project is the split, so the cost breakdown and the amount that they spent for the testing activities. So using BDD at scale, automating 100% of the checks of the test, and starting first by creating tests. So behavior-driven development is part of the test-driven family. It's not TDD, it's the same principle, the same philosophy of TDD, but applied to the business level. So starting first by testing doesn't mean you will increase the amount or the investment you have to do on the test activity. It just means that testing first will help you have a better, more efficient and smoother development process. So when comparing this cost breakdown with other projects inside Parkeon that were not using BDD or a test first approach, they've been able to demonstrate that not only they spent slightly less in terms of testing than what they were doing in other projects using a waterfall approach, but they were also able to deliver the project on time and successfully. I can tell you that having been engaged in a couple of these huge projects, it's not that often that you end up such a project on time and on budget and on scope. So the application, the system does what it is supposed to do. And they didn't had to invest more in terms of testing for that. They just had to use the right approach, and for their context, for this project, BDD was definitely the right one. So if you boss, the manager say, I don't want to start by testing because testing is the activity that we can shrink at the end of the process if we need to, that's not a valid point, I think, and this is what this slide can show us. So that's it for the presentation. It's time now to start the Q&A session. So do we have any questions so far?
Not yet. Yeah, so you can use the Q&A box in Zoom. And
so if you have any question about either the product itself, so any question about Hiptest feature, or how it can help adopt BDD, capture discussion, automate the test, just feel free to ask. If it's about the approach, BDD approach itself, we'll be more than happy to help and answer. Just wanting to mention that for those of you who have started the trial, you have, so during the trial period, the 30 days, the ability inside the test itself to contact the support team. So if you have any question at some point, feel free to use the in-app chat. You'll be in touch with the support team. And if you have a question about the tool itself or BDD, we'll be happy to help.
Okay, no question yet. So what I'm going to do is ask you a question while we have time. So just, yeah, for us to have some feedback. So was this webinar helpful for you? So sadly in Zoom, we can't have, please can't let you write free text. If you have any feedback that could help us get better in those webinars, so something you wanted to see, you didn't see, or something you expected but didn't get, don't hesitate. You can drop an email to hello@hiptest.com. And yeah, any feedback is more than welcome for us. So yeah, don't hesitate. Good or even bad feedback.
We also learn from bad feedback.
Yeah, we learn more from bad feedback. So fire at will if you have anything to tell us.
Okay. So
yeah, in the meantime, still no questions. I'm going to end the poll and thank you for your answers.
Thank you for the feedback. Thank you for your time. We hope you enjoy it. And once again, we're here to help. So should you have any question in the future, we'll be happy to help.
And by the way, one thing we forgot to mention, you'll receive a recording of this webinar in 24 hours, if I recall correctly. Yeah. So yeah, you'll get that by email if you want to share that with anyone who would be interested, colleague, friends, so on. Just don't hesitate to share that. So thanks for your time.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.